we are going through, we're doing a Monster Hunter weapon tier list for World and Iceborne, but not only just for like speedrun times and like overall effectiveness of the weapon, but how the weapon started off in World and ended up in Iceborne. It's not just like of how strong it was over the entire lifespan of the game. Do you know what I'm saying? Do we understand? So a good example, and this is like it's a pretty easy one to start off with, is heavy bowgun. We're going to put a heavy bowgun right up in S. This is the easiest one to explain, because heavy bowgun has been strong from the second World came out until the end of Iceborne, especially with like the Jagras Grand Cannon or whatever it was called, right? There was a spread one that used spread 2 for that was also incredibly strong. I think that was the Jagras heavy bowgun that was really good. Nergigante for spread 3. Yeah, slicing was busted as hell when the game first came out. Clusters in World, do we really need to talk about that very much? And then especially whenever Kulf Taroth came out and Glutton came, that's when heavy bowgun was in a tier of its own. Spare shot and true spare shot and all this other nonsense. It is so damn strong. Cluster slicing, cluster spread. Yeah, kind of in that order. And shield heavy bowgun was also always a thing that was incredibly strong. Behemoth runs and stuff like that. Shield heavy bowgun pretty much had to be played, especially if you're like doing extremith, because there are the other tank weapons like gun lance and stuff like that, but nothing was as near as effective as heavy bowgun. Is there anything better than just having 4 heavy bowguns in a group? No. By a lot. Maybe like 1 light bowgun to like run status, kind of. It does everything, man. It KOs, it stuns, it slices, it paralyzes, it sleeps, it poisons, and it does a shit ton of damage. And it's incredibly safe as well, because like shield 3, you ain't getting hit by nothing. You can you can wear offensive guard with it. Spare shot, so you just have like seemingly endless amounts of ammo. Yeah, piercing. I mean, oh God, piercing. I forgot about piercing ammo. Bow, I would probably put in S tier if this didn't exist. But bow also quite strong from the beginning to the end. We didn't really know how strong bow was though for a while, because it took a while for everybody to figure out the elemental crit motion values and stuff like that. It's really hard to get everything going on bow because you have to have element and all these expensive decorations and all this other stuff. Yeah, it's like, I'm trying to think of it from everybody's point of view too, because like a lot of people that you don't have to have a lot to have heavy bowgun work, but you have to have a lot to make bow effective. Bow was king for a very long time in a different play style, I guess. It was kind of like heavy bowgun was super strong on cheese, but bow was just very strong across the board. Can also paralyze and poison and blast and sleep and do all this other stuff, and just cranks out insane amounts of damage and insane amount of mobility and survivability. Also bow with like evasion mantle and impact mantle, and it just trashes fights. It's like if I could tell that there was like a lot of new players in the chat, I would just like toss on bow and go beat Teostra in like a minute 30, and people would be like, holy shit, this guy's amazing. This is like a really good farming weapon, because like shit can go wrong with heavy bowgun sometimes if you're not running shield heavy bowgun, but like with bow, the monster just hardly ever gets a chance to really play. Bow was good, especially like 2-piece Rathalos whenever it first came out. Kulf Taroth weapons came out. The Kiar bow weapon, like the Kiar bows came out, and bow has just been tearing it up since then. And let me think of, it was kind of in a similar situation whenever Iceborne first came out. There was a best in slot bow for like everything. Aerial bow, I forgot about that. Yeah, aerial bow motion values in original World was pretty nutty as well. But yeah, if I like wanted to style on some monsters and just never have them get up, I'd usually play bow. And it was just more fun to play. It also changed a lot from previous games, which I think is pretty cool. Like, at least heavy bowgun is not very fun to play for a lot of people. I feel like it wasn't fun for me in particular, but bow is like crazy strong and it's fun. I think LBG does deserve to go up here right now. Yeah, Ellis isn't that good. It was very good. It was like kind of King Melee a little bit. Maybe kind of King Melee in World. We're going to go ahead and put Light Bowgun up here as well. Light Bowgun, whenever it first came out, a lot of people were using spread 3 with the Golgoles Wall. I think that's what it's called, Golgoles Whale. Something like that. The Valhazak heavy or light bowgun. Spread 3 was kind of king, so it did a lot of the things that heavy bowgun wanted to do, including mines, and you could also KO and do a lot of good stuff. You can run and gun, a lot of survivability. You could play peak performance sets with it. Yeah, slicing ammo. Slicing ammo was still a thing on light bowgun as well. Elemental crit on light bowgun was a thing of beauty. I loved it. So normal 2 was also pretty much always a thing from start to finish until normal 3 came around. Decently strong in Iceborne, in World, but I feel like it's even stronger now in Iceborne than it was then. You can't talk about light bowgun and not talk about Kolv Teroth and Safi Jiva, right? Like light bowgun is the siege weapon. Remember Aqua Shot or kick, sticks or kick. I think Kolv is what made LBG good. I think Kolv highlighted how good light bowgun could be. I think it kind of made it come to life. Also a fantastic like support kind of weapon, because it's got a really good sheath speed and really good mobility and stuff like that. So like you could do, if you're going to do team dark side type runs or Haim runs, you could run like 3 heavy bowguns and then 1 light bowgun to run status and also kind of run up and trap the monster and stuff like that. Really good sheath speed to put traps down, things like that. Could do spread, could do stickies, could do slicing. Dude, sticky. I forgot about sticky again. Some superstars. The Golgless Whale, the Odogaron light bowgun was also really good karma whenever the game first came out. The Kolv Teroth ones, the rapid fire normal 2. Was that support? Yeah, that one was really good for Kolv Teroth. And then all the elemental ones, Styx was nuts. Styx was crazy. Weapon was so dang strong. And you could just like, what was cool is that it wasn't as expensive to run as bow or heavy bowgun. You could just have sticks, and then that was like, you just had a bunch of different sticks. Like you had your thunder, your water, because it ran like freaking all the elements. Yeah, sticks and blaze. Yeah, because blaze was like ice and fire, I think, or something like that. I think I'm gonna put Greatsword at the top of B tier. So Greatsword was pretty bad for a while. Like the Jagras Hacker, I think, was the best one. It was kind of an even tie between the Valhazak and the Jagras Hacker whenever World first came out. The weapon was kind of meh until Wyvern Ignition came out. Wyvern Ignition came out, then Greatsword skyrocketed to the top. It started killing everything super fast. That's like right when it hit that damage threshold of constantly being able to keep the monster down with headlocks and trip locks and stuff like that. Got that Wyvern Ignition, baby. Got that Wyvern Ignition. The strongest I don't know about ever since, because the beginning of Iceborne was also a little underpowered. And I feel like Greatsword is kind of another one of those weapons that kind of has to have a lot of line to make it work. You know, I feel like my Greatsword runs are either amazing, the monster never gets to play, or it's a complete disaster. Yeah, Joe Greatsword kind of bumped it up a little bit, but it was nothing really compared to Wyvern Ignition. Wyvern Ignition was just better, it had more slots, you could work with decent sharpness on it, and you could put non-elemental boost on there, which was just crazy. You know, they nerfed the motion values for Iceborne, so that's going to kind of drop Greatsword down a little bit. If they kept the motion values for Aerial Greatsword and Iceborne, and then they also kept non-elemental boost, I think I'd probably bump Greatsword up to maybe A tier, but it's kind of been like this, right? Where Greatsword has been the freaking best weapon in the game, or it's been kind of meh for a while. Yeah, no max might, like if you're trying to shoulder and stuff like that, a lot of stuff had to align for Greatsword to work, but yeah, it's a pretty solid freestyle weapon, and it's kind of one of those things where great Greatsword players, like fantastic Greatsword players, make it look a lot better than it actually is. And it takes a tremendous... I've been saying it for a while. I feel like it's the hardest weapon to play properly in the game. Maybe like Sword and Shield might also be up there for hardest weapon in the game, but you have to have tremendous monster knowledge to really get the most out of Greatsword, but it is very, very strong. I feel like, you know, it's a hard weapon to use, because, I mean, if you could kind of give somebody hammer, you could just give a newer player a hammer and they could kind of figure it out, but I feel like if you give a new player a Greatsword, they're just going to get trashed. Every time you're attacking, you should probably be doing TCS, because it's True Charge Slash, just because it's much stronger. Yeah, the TCS shortcut's really nice, and a lot of the slinger stuff that they added for Iceborne was very, very good. It was very, very welcome. You can like change a lot of direction, and you have a good flow with your weapon. I mean, I did it multiple times on the stream where I would you do a jumping wide slash, or, you know what I'm saying, and then you do like the circle wide sweep thing, and then you would slinger shot, and then you could go right into a TCS, and then you roll and you swing, and then it had like a really nice flow to it. Greatsword kind of struggled a lot though at the beginning of Iceborne, just because we didn't do enough damage to the monsters. The monsters' lives were so high, monsters' life bar was so high, and we did so little damage that you couldn't flinch and headlock monsters like you could with the Greatsword. I feel like I need to put Hammer up at the top of B as well, because Hammer has never not done its thing. You know what I'm saying? I might put Hammer maybe a little bit above Greatsword, just because Hammer has a little bit more utility in multiplayer, and then you can also do a lot of the aerial shenanigans with Hammer that you can't do with Greatsword, and it's not quite as effective, but you have more mobility and it's easier to pull off. Hammer KO values multi was so shit. Yeah, and it's easier to make hammer work than it is with Greatsword. You don't really have to have anything. I mean, you don't really need to have that much sharpness. You know what I mean? You don't really have to have that much crit on a lot of the weapons. The Diablos hammer, I can't remember what it was called, but the Diablos hammer uppercut is amazing. You know what I mean? To snag out flyers, you get dunks, you get KOs, and you can get in the position where you headlock the monster and it never really gets up. And it is a very simple, easy to explain weapon. Hammer has been kind of always in the same spot, right? Because it's got like the Diablo Shatterer was very strong at the beginning, and then the Call of Teroth Sleep Hammer came out. That was also a non-elemental boost one, and that kind of carried it through the end of the game. It's easy as hell. Like, you just make one hammer. So, and it's crazy in the story. Like, it's crazy weapon progression. It's great in multiplayer, not as strong as it is solo, but once you also have a little bit of knowledge, the monster pretty much never gets to play with hammer. Yeah, great mobility. I mean, it's just like, it's so flexible, because like, even if you're not, if you're an extreme new player or you're just not very talented or anything like that, you can sacrifice so much other stuff. You don't have to put KO, you don't have to put, I mean, you can put KO in there if you want. You don't really need focus. But yeah, I think that this is a pretty good spot for hammer. I don't know if I should put it above Greatsword. Do you guys think I should put hammer above Greatsword for the consistency? Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put a hammer above Greatsword. Pow, right in the kisser. Pow, right in the kisser. Pow, right in the kisser. Okay, and then after this, I think I'm probably gonna say longsword. Longsword progresses through the story, I think, better than Charged Blade as well. I know that Charged Blade has the fastest time through the story in base world and has pretty impressive speedrun times, but I don't think that's the context for a normal player, because it's a lot more affordable to play. You don't have to have guard decorations and focus and capacity boost and all this other stuff. You can just run the basic Blade Master set with Longsword. Yeah, Longsword is like the most forgiving weapon to play. I think that's also kind of why I want to put Longsword a little bit higher than Charged Blade. I think Charged Blade is a better multiplayer weapon than Longsword, though. I think Longsword might be the worst multiplayer weapon. The longsword speedrun times are better than raw Charged Blade, if we're comparing them raw to raw. Ended in Iceborne pretty good. All the changes that they made were really, really interesting for for Longsword, for Iceborne. So I feel like Longsword transitioned better from base world to Iceborne better than Charged Blade did. Let's not make this a Charged Blade competition or whatever. But I think that the moveset with EI Slash and EI Counter was awesome in Iceborne. I liked also a lot of the mobility stuff that they did with Slinger. But when you are flowing on Longsword, I don't know if there's a weapon that really feels as sick as when you're just going to town and you're playing perfectly. And whenever you're watching really great players play Longsword, you're like, God, this shit is so stupid. So I think I'm going to put that with Longsword. A good, consistent go for a while. I think it ended up as the best weapon and the best melee weapon in the world. And I think we'll go ahead and move Charged Blade. I think we still need to stay in this tier. I don't think I'm going to go down to tier. Charged Blade, whenever it first came out in World, the motion values were all messed up. So raw Charged Blade was, you put on like a you put on like an evasion mantle and you're throwing impact files for like 165 damage. It was like back in base baby World, the motion values were way too high. World was incredibly strong when it first came out. Had a lot of the best speedrun times, freestyle, and TA wiki rules whenever that kind of came out. But I mean, fantastic like in-game monster speedrun times. It's incredibly expensive to play. It's very hard to learn. So that kind of has some hits against it as well, because whereas in base world, whenever you had Longsword, you just told people to foresight slash and Helmbreaker. In Charged Blade, you got to freaking do like calculus, it seems like, for a lot of people to play this weapon. It takes an insane amount of work to use. You need sharpness, you need guard, you need focus, you need raw, you need crit, you need capacity boost, you need all this other stuff, and then also a bevy of knowledge to simply just pick up the weapon, to just walk into it. So I think that has some hits against it. Ice Charged Blade, we got Kiar Ice. Whenever Kiar Ice came out, I feel like it kind of, felt like Charged Blade was back, because we were stuck with Diablos Tyrannus 2, and everybody else all the other weapons kept getting new toys, and we were just stuck with DT2 for a while. We got Teroth Horn, which was basically the same. Charged Blade, once you had the decorations and once you had the know-how, incredibly strong weapon. Good times, kind of across the board. It never really outperformed any of the other three, though. Like, maybe like the Kiar Ice runs, you know, like Teostra and stuff like that, but they were always, at its best, Charge Blade competed with the other 3 melee weapons. I guess that puts it in like a good spot, right? Iceborne came out, the problems got worse for Charge Blade, because we had Savage Axe. Savage Axe was pretty strong, but it was just kind of like more things. I think Savage Axe is a really bad transition from World to Iceborne. It's just, it feels clunky, it's not fun to use. I feel like it's a couple steps back. It's a good idea, but not executed properly. And also the bloated motion, like the bloated monster life, and it just makes you get offensive guard, and it makes you get offensive guard / expert jewels and everything like that. The decoration starvation, I like that. Decoration starvation became even worse with Charge Blade. You got to put more sharpness, you got to put more guard, because monsters have more knockback, so you need to put guard 1, guard 3, guard 5, and offensive guard, and focus, and crit, and sharpness. Now you got to put more, you got to put even more sharpness, because you're doing Savage Axe and stuff like that too. And it didn't really have any good elemental weapons besides Beatotus. Yeah, monsters got faster. Yeah, monsters got faster and higher flinch values and all that stuff. Yeah, more hit trading. Yeah, it's a dang mess. Charge Blade's tough, but when it's firing on all cylinders, it's doing pretty well. I know Sword and Shield is much stronger now, but I'm going to put Dual Blades at the top of C, I think. There were also some crazy runs at the very beginning of World. Remember in Nergigante's playground, when you're like, you just slide, go down his back, turn around, slide, go down his back. You can do some kind of meme runs like that, but I think Dual Blades are also really sick. They progress through the story really, really well. What was cool about Dual Blades as well is that you could do pretty well with them on raw damage, so they progress through the story really well, and you don't really need anything, you just need some sharpness. And I mean, if you're good with your stamina conservation, then it's not too bad of a problem. But you just need some sharpness, which it already had inherently razor sharp in there. But we've talked about it a bunch too, that I don't know if there's a weapon that really outclasses Dual Blades whenever the monster is standing completely still. You know, if you have like a heavy bowgunner, like it's paralyzing the monster over and over again, and you have 3 Dual Bladers on the head, it is gone. Like, it is just evaporated. And yeah, you use the entire move kit of Dual Blades, which I think is really sick. You use the triangle spam, you use the circle gap closer, you use the aerial attack a lot whenever you can. It's just like, everything has like a really good design to it. And I feel like it also got it got some good treatment in Iceborne as well, with the single hit Tenderize. Whenever that came a little bit later, your DPS with Dual Blades is either 0 on 100 or 100. It has no middle term. I think it's pretty good at keeping up tempo on the monster, personally. But Dual Blades was always kind of like in a similar situation as well, where it like, you know, it just always did good damage and it was always really solid. I know people really hate Dual Blade players because it's, you know what I'm saying, it's like it flinches you or whatever, but, you know, whatever, bring flinch free. Progressed through the story nicely, was good in multiplayer because you had so much mobility and you could like stick to the monster like glue. It didn't really feel like I was chasing the monster around all that much with Dual Blades. Sometimes, but I mean, you just have so much mobility. And also the dash whenever you're in demon mode has greater invincibility frames. I think it was also cool, and it wasn't really limited by the fact that you don't have to have lifesteal on it, because you're not like going to be trading with the monster. If you're playing properly on Dual Blades, you can just stack damage on that bad boy. Pretty sick. There's a lot of cool ones. The Anjanath Dual Blades, the Beatotus Dual Blades, really cool. All the Kiar weapons made it way stronger as well. Yeah, Dual Blades is in a good spot, I feel like. I think we go Sword and Shield here. Okay, so now we're getting to the spicy ones, I feel like, as you guys said. So, Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield is a kind of goofy weapon to explain, because just in World, it was just so weak. You know, this is the weapon that everybody talks about, like whenever you're just starting the game out, you should start with Sword and Shield and then kind of learn everything else from there. But, you can heal with your weapon out, which a lot of people think is pretty neato, I guess, even though it has like the fastest sheath speed in the game, so there's no real point. Most of the time you're just like putting away and drinking anyway. Healers and base. Yeah, I mean, we got to take that into account as well. So go through the story nicely. You can pretty much just stack raw if you want. It can run some elemental sets, it can run status, it can run sleep, it can slice, it can KO. It has really good evasion and really good mobility and everything like that. Man, at the beginning of Iceborne, it really struggled as well. It was not very good. Perfect Rush motion values were just too low. It was really fun. I think Perfect Rush is sick. I think it's really fun. I know a lot of people were like, Perfect Rush ruined Sword and Shield, but they were just going from doing Falling Bash to Perfect Rush, and I think Perfect Rush is cooler than Falling Bash. So I think it got improvement. I think it implements Slinger really well, and I think after it got the single hit Tenderize, I think that was really cool as well, because you do like the roll into the Claw Yukin. And then it also got the huge motion value buff on Perfect Rush after that, and then ever since, that's been King Melee. I mean, if this were an End of Iceborne list, this would be up here. This would be right here if this were End of Iceborne, I feel like, because it is so damn good. Yeah, Elemental was also crazy. I mean, you can run Element on this weapon, and you have been able to for a while as well. I mean, you could always run Element in some way if you just do more sword-based stuff. You're usually better off running Raw. You don't need anything on this weapon to do well as well. You don't really need that much sharpness. You don't need that much crit. You don't need that much evasion. There's no, like, you don't have to have focus or anything like that. I still think it sucked too long to be higher than D. I think it's in a good spot because it's just so strong right now. And it wasn't, like, ever really bad. Also, don't forget about things like Sieges and Behemoth and stuff like that. Like, you usually always had like a Mushroom-mancer healer. Like, those guys always would pop up, and they were always welcome. It can KO. It's got really good Slinger implementation as well. The fact that you can like Slinger shot in any direction and then do a Perfect Rush out of it, which is pretty sick as well. It goes through the story well. It's not expensive at all to build. You can do status or element. It's got decent raw motion values as well. After the Perfect Rush buff, it was crazy. You can mount. You can do everything with this weapon. You can also like flash pot with your weapon out and all that stuff too, which is kind of cool. I think it's fun to play. I think it was kind of fun to play with Falling Bash still, but I mean, you could still do Falling Bash. A lot of people do, like, they'll knock the monster down, do a Falling Bash into Perfect Rush. Switch Axe, also, I think we used the Diablos Switch Axe back then as well. Progresses through the story pretty nicely. It's if I recall, you can get the Baroth one for paralysis. It's got some decent times. I think it's pretty boring, but a lot of the same stuff that we've been talking about just doesn't do as much damage as everybody else, and it kind of sucks with Switch Axe that, like, whenever the weapon is at its best, it only then can it's like the definition of situational damage, and it does not even compete. At its best, if you just walked around with heated up sword all the time, it still wouldn't be as good as some of these other weapons. But yeah, I think that's a good spot for it. I don't feel good about putting Switch Axe in any other place. Did it, let's think of some of the stud weapons that it had. They were kind of using, the Devil Joe Switch Axe was really good. The Shara Shivalda Switch Axe was pretty solid. Oh, yeah, Ruin. Yeah, Ruin was really good. Yeah, the Nergigante Luna Switch Axe, that was the stud at the end of World. Baroth Switch Axe was pretty solid. Golian Switch Axe at the beginning of Iceborne was really good. Yeah, that weapon was solid then. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do Hunting Horn here, then, I think. We're going to do here. Is Base World still better than that? Okay, so Hunting Horn. Hunting Horn, another bare bones Blade Master weapon. You don't have to have anything on it except for Melody Extend. Let's see here. What do we talk about? It's got some good times, especially for a support weapon. It's got some decent times, and I think my favorite runs to watch, period, in Monster Hunter World and Iceborne are after my own weapons that I, for obviously like research purposes, but I got a lot of enjoyment out of watching Hunting Horn TA and freestyle runs just because they're pretty big brain. Calculation of damage and dunking and stuff like that. It's like you watch Hunting Horn run and you're like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, just put it down and spin. But then he does like a bunch of hits to calculate the stun, and then he stands up and knocks him back down, and he lets him dunk and all kinds of stuff like that. And Hunting Horn, whenever it got spin, it was also really cool and became an elemental weapon, which was really sweet as well because it's got good elemental multipliers. So you'd be rocking like 3-piece Sappy with some elemental crit and put that bad boy down and just start twirling. It's good through the story. It's a lot of fun to play. The weapon's got a lot of identity. It plays better, plays different than I think any other weapon in the game. You can also run like paralysis and stuff like that and sleep. I mean, you could run like the Radabon one in Base World. I was running, whenever it first came out, I was running Base World Radabon Hunting Horn a decent amount of times because of the sleep and stuff like that. It was kind of cool. Good weapon. A lot of fun, a lot of really good range. It's good in like most situations. Doesn't really struggle against too many monsters. And even if it's a monster that it's not good against, like in sieges and stuff like that, it still serves a purpose. And you got your corner horners and stuff like that, people that just want to play pure support. The freaking Mushroom-mancer dudes that I will never understand. The strength of the weapon is having the weapon out and playing songs and making everybody else strong. So why the hell would you put your weapon away? It's a bad hammer with songs, but it makes everybody else strong. I mean, there's like, increased crit rate and like 20% damage and stuff like that. Like that shit's nothing to sneeze at. Yeah, okay, so insect glaive is going to be in like a tier of its own, because like the main mechanic of the weapon is like managing your bug and flying around and stuff like that, but in base world you couldn't do any of that. It was basically just like a really bad long sword, I guess. It basically just, it was like longsword with a bunch of management that did no damage and had no nukes. I mean, for 90% of Iceborne's life, you would just miss tenderized attacks. It's a light weapon that you'd have to tenderize twice. No drill bugs in World. Insect Glaive got pretty much a big glow up going from World to Iceborne, except for the tenderized attack. It was so bad, and it was like such a huge drawback that it sucks. It just wasn't very good. I just would never tenderize when I'm playing with other players, and most of the time I would just get so fed up with it that I just wouldn't tenderize in the first place. I think if the claw boost decoration came out like, 6 months ago, 7 months ago, that it probably would have been pretty dang good. The dive was a much needed motion value because it does everything. It's a huge nuke. It's got a huge flinch value. It also tags the monster for the bug to automatically attack. Bug drill really gave it the damage necessary, and it gave you a reason to be up in the air. It like kind of restored the identity. And then in Iceborne, we just stacked a lot of raw. You could run elemental, especially when the Kiara ones came out, because they had the elemental bug boosts and stuff like that. Pretty cool. Yeah, Light Break, Insect Glaive. Light Break was, that's a good observation, Theo. The Light Break, the Raging Bracky Insect Glaive, was kind of like the Wyvern Ignition. After that is when it came to life. So Insect Glaive, after Raging Bracky, that's when it was good. So like 20% of the game's life cycle was an okay weapon. Okay, so Lance has always been in a similar situation as well. It does everything right. It is like pretty much a perfect weapon, and kind of has been for a really long time. It's got gap closers. You can run elemental on it. It's not that expensive to run. You can still do like offensive guard. You need a couple levels of guard and stuff like that, some decent sharpness, some master's touch, like stuff like that. It's not, you can typically run a pretty decent blade master set with guard on it and survive with Lance. It's great in multiplayer. It sticks to the monster really well. You can also do kind of like some sort of tanking situation, I guess, if you wanted to do against like Behemoth and stuff like that. Is that what it comes down to? It is a damn near perfect weapon. I think it also implements Clutch Claw better than any other weapon, maybe Hammer, but you can also Clutch Claw while you're on the defensive, which is really sick. It's got the 360 guard, the power guard, it's got the quick guard, it's got the claw guard. Yeah, it's a good weapon. It's just, if it had higher motion values, it would be up there with Hammer and stuff, right? I think that's it. I think that's really all there is to say. Progress through the story, okay, because you could just get like guard boots or something like that early on. That's really the only thing that you need is guards, so you don't get knocked back that much. And progressing through the story you can't put your weapon away to drink, which is kind of annoying, so you're kind of compelled to have some lifesteal on it. So that also kind of hurts it. You never really get a proper opportunity to put your weapon away because you're always up in the monster's shit. I feel like Gun Lance is probably the weakest weapon in the game, mainly because of how weak it was in World, because it didn't do anything right in World. Like the meta by the end of World was to simply not play Gun Lance. You never shelled anything. You didn't play long. You didn't play normal. You stacked a bunch of raw and a bunch of sharpness and crit. You had like no guard or anything like that, and you would just slap the shit out of the monster. Slap, slap, reload. Slap, slap, reload. Slap, slap, reload. You didn't shell anything. Iceborne gave it a lot of good stuff, though. The Wyvern Stake made it an interesting thing. Like, it was a cool dynamic because that was like that. You made your own tenderize place. You know what I'm talking about? You like made your own weak point on the monster, which was kind of cool. The shelling identities and stuff like that, they kind of moved around from time to time. Wide was the best for a while. Normal was the best for a while. Long shelling was the best for a while. And slap lance was the best for a while. It was pretty decently balanced throughout like the life of it. Yeah, it's definitely a lot more flexible now, but at the same time, I don't really feel like it's any better than anything else. And whenever you don't have a Wyvern Stake, it is a tremendous, tremendous loss in damage. And unless you're running some sort of slinger extender kind of thing and you're getting monster pods all the time, stuff like that, it can be a big problem. And I felt like whenever I played a lot of Gun Lance as well, is that I was just constantly chasing the monster around because there's no real gap closers and you can't do anything out of shield. Charge Blade has guard points into AED. Sword and Shield has the back hop into Perfect Rush. Lance has like 15 different counters and stuff like that. Gun Lance just has a shield. I feel like it needs some sort of load counter or some sort of counterattack to necessitate the use of shield, because at like the highest levels it was basically you just didn't even put shield in. You put like earplugs in, you put like no guard or anything like that because there's no reason to do it. But this was the Monster Hunter tier list. What do you guys agree with? What do you disagree with? This is, again, to reiterate, this is not just how it ended in Iceborne. I feel like this is a good list to talk about the entire life of World into Iceborne and at the end. From the very beginning to the very end, I feel like this is where the weapons kind of fell.